A green flag rises over a cobblestone skyline as a geyser of emerald green smoke erupts from a piston-driven smokestack. A procession of creepers wearing tiny harnesses marches beneath it, whistles blaring. Imagine Victorian top hats, soot-streaked villagers, and boilers that explode on schedule. Welcome to an industrial revolution powered by creepers. This is the tale of Professor Crispin Tinkerstone, a blocky inventor with a cracked monocle and a mechanical parrot that screeches whenever something inconvenient happens. He stands on a cobblestone platform, hands stained green, and proclaims that explosions can be civilized. Scene shift, the marketplace. Smoky light slits between factory roofs. Villagers trade coal for bread while harnessed creepers amble, little bellows strapped to their ribs. Tinkerstone addresses a skeptical council, tapping a chalkboard where gears and TNT sit side by side. Explosive power is predictable if you tame the explosion, he says. Someone snorts. A child offers a biscuit to a creeper, which hisses politely. Beat, the first demonstration. A piston lifts a kettle above rails. A creeper in a brass collar is led by rope. It counts in creeper time and pops. Emerald smoke lifts, a lever clicks, and the kettle whistles like a locomotive. The crowd gasps, then applauds, then keeps a respectful distance. Cut to the workshop. Tinkerstone trains an apprentice, Millie, short, sharp, and fond of dynamite-shaped pastries. Why harness creepers instead of coal? She asks. Because coal rusts morals slower, he replies, grinning. Millie watches a creeper polish a piston contentedly. Shift. The creeper boiler appears, a steam engine crossbred with a stage magician. Copper bands, glass pressure orbs, and a revolving platform hold creepers like unwilling passengers. A scoreboard counts controlled pops per hour. Villagers in goggles feed living redstone into funnels. The redstone fizzes and becomes steam. The machine hiccups, then explodes politely into motion, sending barrels down a conveyor with a satisfying thunk. Beat, a comedic montage. Creepers power looms, operate piston saws, and weave stripy soot scarves. One creeper refuses and smokes a tiny clay pipe, becoming oddly fashionable. Town criers' cry pops per minute rise. A barista tries to steam milk with a creeper latte. Art becomes explosive abstract. The narrator grows grave. With innovation comes adaptation. New creeper jobs multiply. Chauffeurs propelling rickshaws, bakers heating ovens, conductors synchronizing mass pops with symphonic precision. Labor disputes appear. Muffled protests and placards reading "Fair Pops Now." A philosophical sheep offers woolly solidarity. Twist, personalities emerge. Percival, a bowler-hatted creeper, refuses to pop on Tuesdays and plays a mournful tune on a flute. He becomes a celebrity. Relief creepers are hired to cover his days. Percival's stance births pops for peace, demanding cushioned crates, sunlight, and scheduled naps. The manager blinks and updates the rota. Insert a brief absurd interlude. A town hall meeting convenes inside a giant piston. Villagers present wool and redstone charts. A fedora-wearing creeper is elected labor overseer, largely because it liked applause. Order, Tinkerstone says, waving a wrench. Someone asks, why not dispensers? The crowd gasps. Scenes shift. Economic ripples. New factories bloom, each with color-coded smoke. Exports swell. Pistons, polished rails, and artisanal obsidian pipes stamped popped with pride. Excoal diggers become creeper stewards. Training manuals arrive. How to read a creeper's mood in 8 easy sniffs. Tinkerstone writes op-eds titled on steam and size. His thin soot mustache lends him gravitas. Irony. The town sought to abolish soot, yet now breathes emerald haze. A kindly zombie charts air-quality glass trees are planted as filters, though they are terrible at hosting birds. A peddler sells creeper-scented candles that explode into confetti, sparking both joy and a citation. Beat. A small crisis. A boiler overpressurizes because an enthusiastic crew misread the cue. The safety valve sings an operatic note, tension snaps. Millie flips a valve with panicked grace, releasing a controlled puff that sends paper hats flying. Relief, Tinkerstone declares, progress is messy. A child laughs, and the town records pops per hour before sharing a pie. Through it all, one question hangs. Can a society built on creatures designed to detonate sustain itself without detonating into chaos? The voice softens, half sober and half free. Creepers are not mere fuel, they are neighbors, artists, saboteurs, and sometimes employees with names. Power is democratized in green plumes, but democratization brings accidents, idiosyncrasies, and ethical puzzles. Final visual. Night falls and factories glow like constellations of ember and brass. Creepers nap in hammocks between chimneys, snoring softly until glass trembles. Tinkerstone watches from his platform, silhouetted against a piston moon. A parade of harnessed creepers marches by, each whistle a heartbeat. He claps softly. Percival plays an off-key note on his flute. The mechanical parrot mimics it. Smoke trails unfurl, spelling the question in emerald. Can an industrial revolution powered by creepers be a marvel of engineering, or a ticking clock in bright green? The answer waits, curious and combustible, as gears click toward tomorrow. In the weeks that follow, rival towns send delegations to learn the green craft. Envoys arrive in powdered socks, carrying polite bribes, jars of lappies, and discreet stacks of polished rails. A grotesquely earnest ambassador from a neighboring duchy requests technical blueprints and offers to trade a single clockwork ostrich. Tinkerstone entertains them, teaching the basics, reading a creeper's mood, calibrating pop cadence, and the subtle art of cushioned crates. He demonstrates a safety protocol involving soft cow pillows, which becomes an instant export hit. Meanwhile, a shadowy faction of pyromaniacal rabbits plots to liberate the creepers, believing detonation is a spiritual calling. They attempt to bribe a janitor squirrel with a bag of spicy carrots, but the squirrel betrays them for the promise of pension benefits. The plot fizzles in a fog of miscommunication and confetti cannons. Cultural life flourishes. A creeper theater stages melodramas where leads pretend to detonate in tragic slow motion. Poets compose ekphrastic verses about pistons, and a folk duo called Coal and Amp Soot rebrands as Pop and Amp Fizz and finds immediate fame. There are parades where creepers wear bonnets and wave politely. Children build tiny models of the boiler and present them at candy fairs. Practical concerns deepen. Insurance agents teach villagers to underwrite pops, and actuaries publish tables. Probability of accidental confetti, 1750. Safety inspectors, a squad of stern beetles, audit boilers, measuring rumble frequencies and recommending earplugs. Laws follow. Caps on daily pops, mandated nap breaks, and an elaborate licensing exam consisting of 3 practical stations and a poetry recitation. Yet, for every regulation, a loophole appears. A rogue tinker rigs a creeper with a pocket watch, causing synchronized naps across the town that confuse timetables and inspire a surprisingly lucrative market in alarm bells. At night, Tinkerstone contemplates the future, balancing pride against polite dread. Tomorrow's choices loom. The first time Clara Steamweld watched a creeper detonate under a steam piston, the sky went emerald and her hair stood up in perfect cubic spikes. A single vaporous crack sent soot in pixelated plumes. Metal plates pinged like record-scratched anvils, and a bellows squealed like a chicken with ideas. That sound, part hiss, part apology, became the heartbeat of her thought. What if the hiss could be harnessed? What if the humble creeper could be the coal of a new machine age? Clara is blocky and brilliant, with a monocle that magnifies one eye into a gleaming square. She tucks her leather apron over a bow tie made of redstone dust and walks like a piston, purposeful, jerky, and oddly musical. She stands amid a field of half-built contraptions, steam pouring in clean cubic clouds, and a ring of curious villagers who keep their distance, clutching bread like talismans. The world smells faintly of copper and moss. The creepers wander nearby, greenskin soft as moss blocks, hissing softly when no one looks beat. Clara sketches on a slab of stone diagrams with arrows that look suspiciously like TNT rods. She labels one arrow containment, another economy, and in cruder handwriting, "Please don't explode the bakery." Hands of villagers point. A child asks, "Is it safe?" Clara grins, the kind of grin that says possibly, probably, and definitely in the experimental budget. The first test rig is a contraption of pistons, minecarts, obsidian troughs, and a rather optimistic furnace. A creeper is coaxed into a low-sheltered channel by a line of raw pork chop and the promise of unattended redstone lamps. Visual. Minecart rumbles. Redstone glows. Clara flicks a lever with the flourish of a magician revealing a rabbit cube. The cart nudges the creeper into place. The camera, if this were a camera, would frame the hiss as close-up green pixels trembling like a sleeping frog. The contraption closes. Glass plates slide. The creeper goes SSS. And then, in a practical economist's nightmare, explodes. At first, the explosion seems catastrophic. Blocks fly. One of Clara's mustaches detaches and lands in the grass. A chicken clucks in mild disapproval. But under the destroyed pistons, a regulated burst of steam escapes into a condenser like a geyser channeled through pipes. When the dust settles, a tiny turbine, previously missing a screw, spins. A lamp dully lights. The crowd whooped. A villager faints and then wakes up with a new appreciation for Risk Twist. The explosion also leaves a signature on the soil, a green residue that glows faintly in the dark. Clara tastes her finger out of instinct and immediately regrets it. She spits. "Not advisable," she says, patting the ground with a handkerchief. That glowing residue hummed in the night like a lullaby and suggested that one creeper might fuel a lantern for a week, a minecart full of creepers might power a loom for an afternoon. Possibility folded into reality like a lever into a piston beat. The next montage is a flurry. Clara building larger containment arenas, villagers wearing helmets fashioned from carved pumpkins, engineers scribbling supply contracts on leather, and a suspicious-looking creeper wearing a tiny bell around its neck. She establishes the green contract, a system where creepers are attracted, guided, and gently persuaded to detonate in safe, engineered chambers. The persuasion mostly involves convincing them that the chamber is just a very dark, very trendy cave. It works because in Minecraft, anything with bait and a gentle push is a solution. Comedic twist. Creeper behavior proves more nuanced than anyone suspected. Some creepers are dramatic, they explode in slow motion for the camera. Others stage walkouts. A group of creepers orchestrates a sit-in on a conveyor belt, forcing Clara to bring in snacks and a mediator. One especially melodramatic creeper, who Clara affectionately names Percival, refuses to detonate unless given an audience and a spot of tea. Boom with dignity seems to be his motto. Clara obliges with tiny teacups. The explosion is both tasteful and efficient beat. Economies bloom in blocky form. Blacksmiths trade iron ingots for controlled bursts that power hammers, turning hours of muscle into minutes of piston-assisted pounding. Textile mills drape wool over powered looms that vibrate like cathedral organs. Villagers line up for the explosion commute, minecarts time to arrive at power plants, synchronized by redstone orchestras. There are odd new jobs: creeper wranglers, sutremediation teams, and the ceremonial boomaster, whose sash is both ornamental and flame retardant, but the reach of a greenport revolution reveals quirks. Scale is a stubborn puzzle. A single creeper can charge a lantern, a regiment of creepers can run a small factory. An entire nation's factories would require an unwieldy migration of creeper herds. The logistics spawn cleverness. Automated lures, enchanted pistons, and a nascent industry of urban creeper farms built like terraced gardens. There are ethics debates on lampposts. One sign reads, "Free explosion" or "Exploited boom." Another hastily painted, Creepers are people too, mostly. The villagers hold town meetings where arguments are voiced in emphatic bangs, because sometimes arguments are best expressed explosively surprising detail. Creepers begin to exert political pressure. At first it is subtle, a few timed detonations near the mayor's house when a tax dispute arises. Then it becomes a performance art movement. Controlled chaos festivals where creepers choreograph explosions to music, the dust glittering like confetti. A notable demonstration features synchronized detonation to the overture of a Blocky orchestra, resulting in fireworks of cobblestone. Clara is amused, then alarmed, then impressed. She realizes she has birthed not just an energy source, but a culture beat. Technological refinements appear as if by competitive necessity. Clara invents the hush box, a padded chamber that dampens the sound of a detonation so delicate instruments can be tuned nearby. An adaptive valve system channels residual glowmuck into batteries called creep cells. Workshops advertise zero-splatter guarantees for boutique clients. And amid the tinkering, a romantic subplot quietly simmers. Clara and a rival engineer, who prefers blaze rods and is named Gideon Gravel, exchange barbed compliments and occasionally trade components under the table. Their flirtation is civil engineering in motion. Comedic twist. The green economy produces a black market for vintage explosions. Rare creeper detonation certificates stamped with the year and the flavor of soot. Collectors brag about owning a 1-0 detonation, which allegedly carries a hint of alpha nostalgia. There is also a fad for fashion. Soot-smudged scarves and explosion-proof hats become chic. A couture house called Boom and Bloom holds a runway show where models strut through illuminated plumes that smell faintly of ozone beat. But not everything scales or dazzles. The countryside shows strain. Unused creeper farms attract phantoms of older mismanagement. Rusted scaffolds, empty minecart lines, and overripe creeper stockpiles that hiss sadly in the wind. Some villages rebel against being near power plants. Children learn the sound of a warning hiss and sleep with earplugs shaped like tiny pickaxes. Environmentalists, a trio of luminous ghostal sages who live in the nether edge, warn of soil compaction and a growing dissonance in the ecosystem. The more Clara powers the world, the more she must reckon with waste, with glowmuck runoff, with villagers who now speak in trade discs and invoices. A small, absurd revelation. Creepers are, in their own way, reproducing the moment-powered culture back at them. They begin to recognize the patterns of lures and time their reproduction cycles to the factory schedules, producing baby creepers who have a chaotic streak for drama and a distinct preference for jazz. Clara watches a tiny creeper sneeze smoke and thinks, with both pride and alarm, that she might have invented a new kind of life-ending beat. As night falls and 1,000 little green lights flick across the horizon, turbines glowing, lamps humming, and distant explosions punctuating the stars, Clara stands atop the tallest condenser, soot on her cheek, monocle reflecting 1,000,000 small pistons. She looks out at a world remade by hisses and ingenuity and wonders whether progress priced in explosions will endure. She taps her wrench against a pipe and says aloud, almost to herself, "We can make a machine run, but can we make it good?" The question hangs in the cooling air like a spent spark, and the scene fades on her silhouette, preparing the viewer for deeper consequences. The politics of power, the economics of boom, and whether the creepers will ever ask for more than tea. At the instant the creeper exhaled its first polite puff, the workshop held its breath. Professor Ada Greenstone, goggles askew and sleeves rolled, cradled a copper coil like a newborn. Her face was blocky, serious, and delighted. Outside, fields of pixelated wheat shimmered, and a row of crouched creepers hummed in patient green chorus. The spark chamber smelled of wet stone, burnt toast, and ozone. Obsidian panels stood like cathedral ribs. Glass tubes bubbled neon lime. Ada's bench groaned under brass pistons, redstone valves, and a suspiciously comfy armchair labeled Peer Review the Plan was audacious. Convert creeper explosive energy into controlled mechanical work. Ada had sketched it on a napkin that doubled as a tea coaster, and now the napkin's lines hummed like circuitry kip. A jittery apprentice with a permanent coal smudge asked softly, "Is it dangerous?" Ada tapped the coil. "Of course," she said, and her tone meant something between probably and well, find out. But danger is only unrefined energy scene cuts. Close-ups on harnesses, wide shots of turbines, slow pans of Ada's hopeful smile. A creeper fitted with a gold band, a strip of slime, and a tiny wool muffler shuffled into a transparent ring. The dial-marked temperament clicked. The creature inhaled a soft sizzle, and a bolt of emerald sprang from its chest. The bolt arced, hit a copper coil, and the coils spun, pushing a piston. Bread ovens rumbled. Water wheels ticked back to life. The single pop translated into industry. Kip's jaw dropped. A pebble clinked from his boot montage. Villages wired into greenlit networks. Windmills wore blast receivers. Forges traded charcoal for scheduled puffs. Markets sold green cells, neat cartridges containing calibrated pops. A bakery in New Barrelford advertised creeper-fired loaves. Customers complained only about the faint hiss of scandalized crust. The economy rewired. Creeper shepherds became a trade. Guilds printed manuals: how to keep your creeper content, the gentle puff, and etiquette for not blowing up the town hall. Insurance sold accidental demolition policies. The mayor wore a hat with a tiny green ribbon as civic reassurance. Ada loved the messy data. Every popped cartridge, every scorched cobble, every politely puffed creeper fed her maps. She mapped moods: hungry, sulky, indulgent, and theatrically dramatic. She correlated them with note blocks, cats, and suspicious birches. The graphs looked like weather reports for mischief, but the Green Revolution was not merely technical. It raised questions: consent, dignity, and the rights of explosive citizens. Ada hosted a forum under a banner reading Sparks and AMP standards. Creeper representatives hissed through translators. The sound was musical and slightly accusatory. One delegate set off a microphone as a joke, which burst into static, and glitter policies emerged. Humane harnessing, mandatory nap zones, and a binding snack agreement guaranteeing 2 slime cubes and 1 note block lullaby per week. It sounded absurd, but the forms were signed. The unionized creeper collective processed calmly down Main Street, banners knitted in calming hues. Tourists clapped. Engineering iterations sped up. The dampening net moved from wool to engineered lattice, a woven web that rerouted blast shock. Blast conduits matured into piston-android stone loops that hissed contentedly. Ada introduced cycloidal containment, a rotating field that turned radial pops into directional thrust. Explosions became choreography, sparks arcing into turbines in precise arcs. There were spectacular flops. A zero-waste prototype painted the sky neon and left artists delighted. A factory's megacharge singed the mayor's ceremonial hat, transforming his dignity into accessories. Yet public appetite for risky brilliance grew. Fame followed. Bards composed syncopated odes to the hiss, the soft puff, and long live the green spark. Statues rose. A bronze creeper in a hard hat, plaque reading useful and explosive. Ada accepted a medal, pinned by a solemn creeper, who nodded with the dignity of something that had been politely asked and politely obliged. The green grid answered questions of storage and smoothing. Capacitors, crystalline vaults, and enchanted batteries formed a quilt of infrastructure. Farmers drew power at Don Baker's, scheduled explosive rise shifts. Street lamps glowed emerald at dusk. Trains inhaled soft pops and chugged politely through the hills. The paradox remained: a civilization thriving on creatures that detonate. The images were absurd and oddly tender. Bridges lit by gentle blasts, laundries employing weekend pop shields, and festivals where 10,000 synchronized hiss lit an entire valley for a night kip. Once shaky, now soot-streaked and composed, watched a harvest lit by synchronized creepers. He whispered, "We turned worry into work." Ada, who loved curves more than crowds, smiled and checked a gauge plans proliferated. Entrepreneurs peddled creeper consultancy, advising towns on optimizing puff schedules. A startup sold subscriptions to curated hiss playlists' ambient sizzle for productivity. The premium tier included a lullaby composer. Even artists adapted, staging detonation operas where synchronized pops accompanied tragic block romances. Unexpected problems crept in. Some creepers preferred lounging under moonlight instead of punctual puffs. Weather-mattered rain dampened spirit and output. Over-reliance on green energy made certain towns complacent. When a fungal blight struck slime farms, some districts sputtered, and suspicious townsfolk hoarded green cells like pantry goods. Ada realized resilience required redundancy. She sketched hybrid grids, blending creeper bursts with wind and hydro. She invited miners and librarians into design sessions, an unlikely chorus of experience harmonized into emergency protocols. Kip led outreach, teaching villages how to temper their appetite for spectacular charges. Small training halls popped up, literally and figuratively, with padded floors and do not unleash manuals. There were philosophical debates. Was harnessing a partnership or exploitation? Did the creepers consent fully, or were incentives merely clever conditioning? Ada argued for mutual benefit. A creeper philosopher, translated as a series of contemplative hisses, proposed a manifesto, Puffs for Purpose. It read like a pamphlet and smelled faintly of gunpowder and Basil Funhouse discoveries continued. Creeper-powered contraptions ranged from sublime to silly, auto milkers that coughed on schedule, coffee presses that thrummed with anticipation, and a short-lived craze for puff pets, plush creeper dolls that huffed when you tickled their bellies. The cultural tapestry thickened, but beneath the jokes and charts there was a quiet question shaping policy. If a single miscalculation could erase a village. The night the sky turned the color of TNT dust, Professor Tink stood on the smokestack and smiled as if the whole world had rearranged itself into a green idea. Below him, the new factories breathed, piston bellows, cobblestone chimneys, and an orchestra of hissing creepers harnessed like living batteries. The revolution everyone had drawn in their recipe books had an absurd, serrated heartbeat. The gentle, anxious fizz of 1,000 fuses being held, and never lit a bell clanged. A line of creepers shuffled into harnesses framed by iron bars and wool padding. Close up, you could see the pixel dust on their cheeks, the tiny anxious spark in their eyes. Professor Tink's glove gently pressed a pressure plate. A creeper exhaled, a flywheel spun, a conveyor coughed out a plank. Scene cut. Wood smelled like victory and Chargreta Girite. The tinker from the next village, kitted in goggles and elevator grease, crouched by a steam regulator and hummed a tune. She had taught a subset of creepers to hum softly instead of detonating when stroked with a redstone rod. The humming protocol reduced accidental explosions by 50%, until the day the creepers discovered the chorus part. They sniffed the air, synchronized their hisses, and the factory turned into a strange, blocky choir. Workers paused, jaw blocks slack, as the rhythm made pistons dance in ways that made none of the blueprints proud cut to an assembly line of miniature dynamocrates. Each crate was a gentle cage, wool inside, a cushion, a chalkboard with the creeper's name. One named Sparky preferred the north side, another, Mellow, liked lullabies. It looked tender, like a school field trip that powered a textile mill. A foreman villager in suspenders tapped a clipboard and said, "Less boom, more zoom." He meant production. The city adapted fast. Street lamps became green globes powered by captive creeper coils. Trains huffed along rails laid with creeper-charged batteries, sounding like low, polite burps. The marketplace replaced coin with spark notes, little tokens stamped with a creeper silhouette. Farmers sold grain for fuses, and children traded firework designs for time in the observation loft to watch creepers drift in moonlight. The aesthetic was unmistakable. Soot, steam, and an undercurrent of twitchy, coiled potential. Not everything was efficient. There were mornings when a rogue creeper, inspired by nostalgia or a particularly stirring hymn, would leap from a comfort crate and set off a small, perfectly rounded hole in the factory floor. Those holes became cafes. Patrons sat around them with mugs of cocoa, talking about safety protocols with the solemnity of philosophers. The explosions were always neat blocks reassembled later, as if embarrassed by the chaos. In a comedic stroke of municipal policy, the Bureau of Boom passed a law. Explosions must be photographed and archived. An entire bureaucracy formed to curate the art of controlled detonation. Exhibit A featured a sequence of creepers arranged like dominoes, exploding in colors that matched the seasons. Tourists came in flocks, clutching guidebooks that explained the grammar of a good huff. Innovations followed necessity. Engineers invented the fuse translator, a gadget that converted creeper mood into a meter readout. Content: disgruntled, romantic, sleepy. City councilors used it to assign tasks. Romantic creepers were set to power the glass-blowing district. Their gentle surges made molten sand bloom into elegant panes. Disgruntled creepers were relegated to demolition crews, where their talent for tidy explosions was oddly appropriate. A rogue band of creepers labeled indie refused any label and powered a jazz club by night. The central character, Professor Tink, became less of a mad scientist and more of a civic engineer. He kept journals full of diagrams, collaborative sketches with creeper doodles in the margins. He had a tamed way of arguing with circuits like they were moral partners. Once, when a governor asked whether the experiment was ethical, he replied, "We do not make them explode, we ask them to participate." It was a small line that sounded noble until a creeper nearby sneezed and everyone laughed. The twist nobody predicted came from the creepers themselves. After months of being charged and soothed and given names, some of them began to develop preferences that did not fit human planning. They preferred certain songs, certain moon phases, and most troubling for industrial planners, they started to unionize. The first meeting was held behind a wool curtain in a heating shed. A creeper in a tiny paper cap tapped a pebble to call attention. The meeting ended with a chorus of synchronized, which translated roughly as more grass breaks and less explosive overtime negotiations with vending machine managers ensued. Villagers learned to bargain with hiss and body language. Contracts were drawn up on parchment, paid naps, scheduled burps, guaranteed access to sunlit meadows. The economy folded these demands into payrolls and productivity reports. The result was surprisingly humane. Happier creepers, fewer accidental holes, and an emergent culture obsessed with picnic breaks. But capitalism has a thirst that bends even idealism. An industrialist named Lord Cobblewick sought to export the system. He packaged creeper power TM into boxed modules that promised to turn any village into a humming, profitable hub. There were demonstrations, markets lit by captive chorus sparks, wind-up miners pocketing rare ore. The plug for a creeper module read high output, low remorse. It sold out. The export brought new consequences. Out-of-towners lacked the patient rituals the original towns had developed. They fed creepers nothing but days and deadlines. Explosions multiplied, less neat, more spiteful. Entire factory wings became abstract sculptures of missing blocks and startled scaffolding. The creative cafes shuttered. Someone painted graffiti, "We were not inventory." The graffiti held more moral weight than any town meeting. Professor Tink, who had always believed in engineering as moral craft, convened a summit. The scene alternated between solemn council chambers and the soft green glow of the creeper pens. He proposed a radical idea: infrastructure that was not built on hiding discomfort, but on designing consent. Replace cages with gardens, replace overtime with song breaks, and design machines that could politely decline a surge. The engineers groaned, accountants wept over spreadsheets. Yet the change worked. Machines learned to respect a creeper's mood meter like a traffic light. Factories began producing beautiful, slow-crafted objects. The revolution matured into something less loud and more resilient. Productivity dipped, then steadied. Villagers found slower rhythms worth trading for fewer, more intentional booms. In the end, the Industrial Revolution powered by creepers built rail and light, and a new